The polished elevator doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the gleaming 42nd floor of Kingsley Capital. Marcus Wright stepped forward, his custom Oxford sinking into carpet thicker than most people's mattresses. The receptionist's smile froze when she saw him, her coral-painted lips forming a perfect O before she recovered. "Mr. Wright," she chirped, fingers fluttering to her headset. "Let me just see if they're ready for you." Through the glass walls of the conference room, Marcus watched Richard Kingsley III, heir to the Kingsley fortune, owner of 3 yachts and 1 Senate seat, pause mid-sip of his single-origin Ethiopian coffee. Their eyes met. Kingsley's gaze dropped to Marcus's handmade briefcase, then back up to his face. Then, with the casual cruelty of a man who'd never been told no, Kingsley turned his back and resumed his story about golf handicaps. The junior analyst assigned to escort Marcus, some prep school kid whose watch cost more than Marcus's first car, hovered awkwardly. "Sorry about this," he mumbled, wiping his palm on his trousers before extending it. Then, remembering where he was, he let it drop. "House policy," he lied. Marcus felt the familiar heat rise up his collar. 12 years ago, it had been a Kingsley internship rejection letter that sent him spiraling. 5 years ago, it was being escorted from their gala by security who didn't recognize him. Today he let his briefcase click open on the conference table, revealing the documents inside, the same ones Kingsley's team had been begging to see for months. "Tell me," Marcus said, loud enough for every head to turn, "does this house policy apply when you're about to lose the house?" The room went so quiet he could hear the ice melting in Kingsley's abandoned scotch. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered indifferently. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, Marcus's pregnant wife was probably rubbing her swollen feet, waiting for his call. He'd promised her this would be the last meeting. What he hadn't said, that he'd spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. The junior analyst's eyes darted between Marcus and the documents, the financial lifeline Kingsley Capital desperately needed. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Mr. Kingsley, perhaps we should." "50 million, Marcus said, cutting him off. "That's my offer." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a pen. Not the Mont Blanc these men used to sign away lives. A simple Bic, like his father had carried to his teaching job every day for 30 years. "And gentlemen," he let the pen hover over the dotted line, "you'll have to shake on it." The polished elevator doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the gleaming 42nd floor of Kingsley Capital. Marcus Wright stepped forward, his custom Oxfords sinking into carpet thicker than most people's mattresses. The receptionist's smile froze when she saw him, her coral-painted lips forming a perfect O before she recovered. "Mr. Wright," she chirped, fingers fluttering to her headset. "Let me just see if they're ready for you." Through the glass walls of the conference room, Marcus watched Richard Kingsley III, heir to the Kingsley fortune, owner of 3 yachts and 1 Senate seat, pause mid-sip of his single-origin Ethiopian coffee. Their eyes met. Kingsley's gaze dropped to Marcus's handmade briefcase, then back up to his face. Then, with the casual cruelty of a man who'd never been told no, Kingsley turned his back and resumed his story about golf handicaps. The junior analyst assigned to escort Marcus, some prep school kid whose watch cost more than Marcus's first car, hovered awkwardly. "Sorry about this," he mumbled, wiping his palm on his trousers before extending it. Then, remembering where he was, he let it drop. "House policy," he lied. Marcus felt the familiar heat rise up his collar. 12 years ago, it had been a Kingsley internship rejection letter that sent him spiraling. 5 years ago, it was being escorted from their gala by security who didn't recognize him. Today he let his briefcase click open on the conference table, revealing the documents inside, the same ones Kingsley's team had been begging to see for months. "Tell me," Marcus said, loud enough for every head to turn, "does this house policy apply when you're about to lose the house?" The room went so quiet he could hear the ice melting in Kingsley's abandoned scotch. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered indifferently. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, Marcus's pregnant wife was probably rubbing her swollen feet, waiting for his call. He'd promised her this would be the last meeting. What he hadn't said, that he'd spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. The junior analyst's eyes darted between Marcus and the documents, the financial lifeline Kingsley Capital desperately needed. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Mr. Kingsley, perhaps we should." "50 million, Marcus said, cutting him off. "That's my offer." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a pen. Not the Mont Blanc these men used to sign away lives. A simple Bic, like his father had carried to his teaching job every day for 30 years. "And gentlemen," he let the pen hover over the dotted line, "you'll have to shake on it." The silence stretched like a noose. Kingsley's phone buzzed insistently on the table, the board calling, no doubt. Marcus could almost see the calculations flickering behind those cold blue eyes. The quarterly reports, the investor calls, the whispers already circulating about Kingsley's failing European ventures. All the things Marcus had meticulously researched while rocking his newborn daughter to sleep at 3 a.m. Kingsley's manicured fingers twitched toward the contract. The junior analyst held his breath. Somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged, the sound of someone's ordinary day continuing, while this moment hung suspended between what was and what would be. Marcus didn't blink. He'd waited 12 years for this. He could wait 12 more seconds. The silence in the conference room grew teeth. Marcus watched Kingsley's throat work as he swallowed, once, twice, before the older man reached across the table. The junior analyst gasped when their hands met. Kingsley's palm was damp, his grip just shy of painful. Marcus squeezed back harder, feeling the man's Yale ring dig into his fingers. "Welcome aboard," Kingsley ground out between clenched teeth. Marcus released his hand and turned to the window where the afternoon sun painted the skyline gold. His reflection showed no trace of the hungry kid who'd once pressed his nose to these very windows, dreaming of the day he'd belong inside. The junior analyst scurried forward with a fresh coffee. "How do you take it, Mr. Wright?" Marcus didn't look away from the view. "Black." His lips curved as the kid fumbled the cup. "Just like my coffee." Kingsley's pen scratched across the contract. The sound was sweeter than Marcus had imagined. Outside, the city pulsed with possibility. Somewhere down there, another young black financier was being told he didn't fit the culture. Another hungry dreamer was being turned away at the door. Marcus took his signed copy and tucked it into his briefcase beside the photo of his daughter. This wasn't the end. It was the first move. The Kingsley Capital elevator doors opened to chaos. Marcus stepped out onto the trading floor to find half the staff already packing their desks. The stench of panic hung thick in the air, burnt coffee, stale sweat, and the acrid tang of toner from the overworked copiers spitting out termination notices. A hush fell as he walked by. Whispers followed him like a wake. "That's him. Bought the distressed assets division." Heard he made Kingsley shake his hand. The junior analyst, Parker, his name tag read, nearly dropped his box of belongings when Marcus stopped at his cubicle. The kid's eyes were red-rimmed, his once crisp shirt wrinkled beyond salvation. "You kept my card," Marcus said, nodding to the smudged business card taped to Parker's monitor. Parker swallowed hard. I called. That night. You never." "I know." Marcus plucked a framed photo from the box, Parker and a smiling blonde at some vineyard. "Engagement party? Was supposed to be next month." Parker's voice cracked. "Her father works at Goldman. Told her to call it off unless I." Marcus handed him a new key card. "Tell your fiancée to wear her best dress. We're announcing the merger Monday." Parker's hand shook as he took it. The ID read, Parker Ellington, VP of Acquisitions, Wright Capital Group. Down the hall, Kingsley's office door slammed open. "You can't just..." Kingsley froze when he saw Marcus, his face purpling. "This is my firm." Marcus smiled. "Correction." He held up the contract. "It's my distressed assets division, and my first order of business." He nodded to Parker. "Hiring back everyone you just fired." Kingsley lunged, whether for the contract or Marcus's throat. No one would ever know. But his foot caught on the corner of an abandoned desk. The sound of his $3,000 watch hitting the floor echoed through the silent trading floor. Marcus didn't flinch. "Parker, Why, yes, sir. Call security. He stepped over Kingsley without looking down. We have a house policy about trespassers. The Wright Capital sign gleamed under the morning sun as Marcus stepped out of his town car, the brass letters still smelling of fresh polish. The same security guard who'd once stopped him at the Kingsley lobby now snapped to attention, his crisp salute almost comical. "Morning, Mr. Wright." Marcus adjusted his cuffs, no longer the navy tie his father had worn, but a bold crimson one Zoe had picked out. "Any trouble last night?" The guard's jaw tightened. Mr. Kingsley showed up around midnight, demanded to clear out his office. Marcus already knew. The security cameras had caught every glorious second, Kingsley stuffing golf trophies into a cardboard box, knocking over his own monogrammed whiskey decanter in his haste. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt different now. The doors opened to a sea of new faces, black, brown, female, queer, all people Kingsley would have never hired. The trading floor buzzed with an energy it hadn't seen in years. Parker stood waiting, looking almost unrecognizable without the perpetual sweat stains on his collar. "Sir, the Fed just approved our..." A scream cut him off. Marcus turned just in time to see Kingsley barrel through the lobby, his tailored suit rumpled, eyes wild. "You think this is over?" Spittle flew from his lips as security struggled to restrain him. "I built this firm from..." "Actually," Marcus said calmly, "your great-grandfather built it with railroad money. You just inherited it." He nodded to the guards. "Escort him out." Gently. As Kingsley was dragged away, Marcus caught sight of a janitor, an older black man who'd once slipped him extra creamer during those late-night internship rejections. The man winked, polishing the new brass plaque by the elevators. "Wright Capital Group. Value where others don't look." Marcus's phone buzzed. Zoe's text lit up the screen. "Dad, I aced my econ test. When do I start my internship?" He smiled. The real takeover was just beginning. The New York Stock Exchange bell rang at exactly 9:30 a.m., its chime reverberating through the marble halls as Marcus stood at the podium. Flashes from a dozen cameras reflected in his cufflinks, engraved with the Wright Capital W, that now hung where Kingsley's golden K once presided. Behind him, the digital ticker scrolled live updates. Wright Capital Group, WCG, plus 210% IPO. Parker stood to his left, no longer the trembling junior analyst, but the newly minted COO. To his right, the janitor, now head of facilities, adjusted his tie with calloused hands. "Any questions?" Marcus asked the press pool. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal stood first. "Mr. Wright, analysts are calling this the most successful IPO since Facebook. What's next?" Before Marcus could answer, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Richard Kingsley shoved past security, his once impeccable suit hanging loose, his hair greasy under the fluorescent lights. The stench of alcohol preceded him like a warning. "You think this makes you a king?" Kingsley slurred, drawing gasps from the crowd. "I'll bury you. My family's been in this business for 4 generations." Marcus finished calmly. "I know." He nodded to the projection screen behind him, where a live feed showed Zoe, his 16-year-old daughter, ringing the opening bell at the London Stock Exchange. Wright Capital Europe's debut. Kingsley's mouth worked soundlessly. Marcus adjusted his mic. "To answer your question," he said to the reporter, never breaking Kingsley's gaze, "legacy isn't about how long you've been in the game." The screen switched to a live shot of the original Kingsley Capital building, now the Wright Capital Youth Finance Academy, its glass doors propped open as dozens of black and brown teenagers streamed inside for their first day of classes. "It's about who you bring with you." Security finally dragged Kingsley away, his screams fading into the hum of the trading floor. Marcus turned back to the cameras, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Next question." 5 years later, the Harvard Business School lecture hall buzzed with students clutching copies of From Rejection to Revolution, the Wright Capital story. At the podium, Marcus adjusted his microphone, the same model he'd used for his first investor pitch in a church basement 20 years prior. "Final question," the dean announced. A young black woman stood, her locks cascading over a Wright Capital internship hoodie. "Sir, What's the one lesson you want us to take from your journey? Before Marcus could answer, the doors burst open. Richard Kingsley III shuffled in, leaning heavily on a cane. The students gasped. The once mighty financier now looked every bit as 70 years, his tailored suit hanging loose on gaunt frames. The stench of cheap gin followed him down the aisle. "You ruined me," Kingsley croaked, spittle flying. "Turned my own board against." "Actually," Marcus said calmly, "you did that yourself when you liquidated the employee pension fund." He nodded to the projection screen, where a live feed showed Kingsley's former Hamptons estate, now the Wright Capital Leadership Academy, its manicured lawns filled with laughing children. Kingsley's cane clattered to the floor. "I just wanted," his voice broke, "to keep what was mine." Marcus stepped down from the podium. For the first time in decades, he saw not the titan who denied him entry, but a broken old man clutching at ghosts. "Funny thing about legacies," Marcus said, handing Kingsley his cane. "They're not kept, they're built." He turned back to the student. "To answer your question, the lesson is simple." The screen changed to show Zoe at the Wright Capital Africa groundbreaking, her locks now threaded with gold like her father's once were, her smile brighter than the Accra sun. "Make sure the door hits you last." The scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the salty Hamptons breeze as Marcus walked the grounds of the former Kingsley estate. Children's laughter echoed from the new Wright Leadership Academy pool, where Olympic hopefuls trained, their scholarships funded by Kingsley's liquidated art collection. Zoe fell into step beside him, her gold-threaded locks now streaked with executive silver at 29. "Board's waiting," she said, handing him a tablet. The screen showed their latest acquisition, a floundering Kingsley subsidiary. Marcus chuckled, like taking candy from a Mr. Wright. A teenager sprinted across the lawn, the spitting image of Parker, right down to the nervous tie adjustment. "I got into Harvard. Early decision." Marcus ruffled the boy's hair. "Your dad tell you how we met?" "Only every Thanksgiving." Parker Jr. grinned. "When he makes us watch the video of you handing him that key card." Inside the converted ballroom, the board stood as Marcus entered. The janitor's son at the head of the table, the Goldman exec who'd once dismissed Parker, now their lead counsel, and at the far end, a face that made Marcus pause. The redhead from his first rejection sat stiffly in a Wright Capital blazer, her designer nails tapping nervously. I applied through the diversity initiative," she stammered. Zoe's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We know." The vote was unanimous. The Kingsley subsidiary would become their newest youth tech incubator. As the board cheered, Marcus slipped outside to the cliffside gazebo where Kingsley had once sipped martinis. Below, the Atlantic crashed against the rocks, the same waves that had carried slave ships, then immigrant boats, then private yachts. Soon, they'd carry Wright Capital's first generation of scholars to study abroad. Zoe joined him, pressing a cold lemonade into his hand. "Penny for your thoughts." Marcus watched a young black lifeguard teach a group of kids to swim in Kingsley's old pool. "Just thinking," he said, clinking his glass against hers, "how far the tide comes in." The private jet touched down at Teterboro just as dawn broke over Manhattan. Marcus pressed his forehead to the window, watching the Wright Capital Tower pierce the pink-streaked sky, its obsidian facade reflecting the crumbling Kingsley building across the street. Zoe nudged his shoulder. "Stop gloating." "Who's gloating?" Marcus smirked, straightening his tie, a vintage Navy number from his father's collection. "I'm appreciating architecture." The car ride downtown was quiet. Too quiet. Even the driver, a former Kingsley security guard who'd been first in line when Wright opened their driver training program, kept glancing in the rearview. "Spit it out, Jamal," Marcus said. The man's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "They say Kingsley's grandson is back. Harvard MBA. Says he's gonna rebuild." Zoe snorted. "With what? Their stock's trading at toilet paper levels." Marcus said nothing. He'd seen the reports. Young Richard Kingsley IV wasn't like his grandfather. Quiet, strategic, the kind of man who wore $20 watches and donated half his trust fund to inner-city chess programs. The elevator doors opened to chaos. Half the trading floor was crowded around the Bloomberg terminals. On screen, a press conference played. Kingsley Ford standing before the boarded-up remains of his family's original Harlem brownstone, now converted into a community center. "Honor my grandfather's mistakes," the young man was saying, his crisp accent belying the sweat on his brow. "Starting with this." The camera panned to a gleaming plaque, the Marcus Wright Fellowship for Ethical Finance. Parker's son burst from the crowd, phone aloft. "Sir, he just pledged $50 million to our Bronx Youth Fund." The room erupted. Marcus kept his eyes on the screen, on Kingsley IV's shaking hands, the way he kept glancing at the camera, like he expected to be struck down. Zoe's nails dug into his arm. "This is some PR stunt, right?" Marcus watched as Kingsley knelt to help an old woman up the brownstone steps, the same janitor who'd once slipped Marcus creamer all those years ago. "No," Marcus said softly. "I don't think it is." He turned to his team. "Get me a meeting with young Richard." As the elevator doors closed, Marcus caught his reflection. Not the hungry intern from decades past, nor the vengeful titan of recent years. Just a man. A bridge between what was and what could be. The car ride back uptown was quieter still. The old Kingsley brownstone smelled of fresh paint and history. Marcus ran his fingers along the original mahogany banister, still scarred from where Richard Kingsley III had once thrown a decanter at a junior analyst. Now, sunlight streamed through new floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a wall-sized mural of financial pioneers, Garrett Morgan, Maggie Walker, and right there in the center, a younger Marcus accepting his first business license. Richard Kingsley cleared his throat by the fireplace. "I had them preserve the original hearth." He nudged a loose brick with his Oxfords, the same model Marcus had worn to his fateful meeting decades prior. "Found my grandfather's liquor stashed behind here. 1942 Macallan." Zoe arched a brow. "You drink it." "Used it to christen the fellowship fund." Kingsley IV's smile didn't reach his eyes. Seemed poetic. Marcus studied the young man, the way his crisp white shirt strained at the shoulders, off the rack, not bespoke. The faint ink stains on his fingers, a man who still used pens, not assistants. This was no spoiled heir. This was something more dangerous. A worthy successor. The silence stretched. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe groaned. Finally, Kingsley exhaled. "I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness, but I will ask." He pulled a yellowed envelope from his blazer, the original rejection letter they'd sent Marcus in 2003. For the chance to do better. Zoe stiffened. Marcus didn't blink. Outside, shouts erupted as a group of Wright Capital scholars spilled from the community center across the street, their laughter carrying through the open windows. Kingsley watched them with something like hunger. "My grandfather spent 30 years building walls," he said softly. "I'd like to spend 30 tearing them down." Marcus reached into his own pocket. The big pen from all those years ago had been bronzed, its cheap plastic preserved under glass. He set it gently on the mantel beside Kingsley's envelope. "Start with the boardroom at 60, Wall Street," he said. "They still won't shake black hands there." For the first time, Kingsley IV's smile reached his eyes. "I know. That's why I resigned from their board last week." Zoe burst out laughing. The sound echoed through the brownstone like breaking chains.